MSNBC just aired one of the most revealing monologues I've actually seen in a long time. And I don't mean revealing about Donald Trump. I mean revealing about how the media actually thinks about you. Watch this.
Well, on Saturday, when I saw this sign at a No Kings protest, I really wished David Potoff could see that. David Potoff was the smartest person I have ever known about economic policy, and he did not like Donald Trump. Donald Trump was right about that. Smart people don't like him.
Smart people don't like him? So there it is. That's what they actually think. If you voted for Donald Trump, you're stupid. Not misguided, not wrong, stupid. And Larry O'Donnell just said the quiet part out loud. And I want you to remember this moment, because this isn't analysis. This is contempt. And it's exactly why Donald Trump won. Twice. So let me translate what you just heard. This entire monologue is Lawrence O'Donnell eulogizing his economist friend who hated Donald Trump. And he's using that eulogy to tell 75 million Americans that they're idiots. That's the game that Larry's playing. Now, I'm sorry for Larry's loss. I mean, losing a friend is hard. But using your platform to weaponize that grief into a political propaganda agenda? Well, that's MSNBC in a nutshell. Here's what he's actually doing. He's taking one dead economist from MIT, declaring him the arbiter of intelligence, and then using that to dismiss everybody who disagrees. It's the ultimate appeal to authority fallacy wrapped up in some strange emotional manipulation. But let's talk about the smart people and what we actually did. Smart people told us Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. Smart people told us that the economy was fine in 2007. And also smart people told us inflation was transitory. Smart people also told us that that border was secure. Well, how did all of that work out? Maybe, just maybe, the problem isn't smart people don't like Trump. Maybe the problem is that people who call themselves smart keep being catastrophically wrong about everything that matters to regular Americans. Now watch this next part.
And David was everything that Donald Trump hates. David Potoff was a dedicated public servant in every sense who never tried to get rich and tried to make his country and his community a better place every day of his life. And on October 8th of last year.
So hold on. David was everything that Donald Trump hates? A dedicated public servant who never tried to get rich and tried to make his country better every day? That's supposed to be an insult to Donald Trump, I guess. You just described what Trump voters want. Someone who can't be bought. Someone who puts America first. And someone who doesn't need the job because they're already successful. So let me flip this around. You know, what Trump actually hates. Lifelong politicians who get rich off of public service. Bureaucrats who think they know better than the voters. Consultants who profit from our endless wars. Well, that's what Trump ran against. David Potoff opposed Trump on economic policy. That's fine. He can do that. That's a legitimate disagreement. But let's check under the hood. Under Donald Trump, and before the global health crisis hit, median household income was up 6.8% in 3 years. Poverty rate hit a 50-year low. Black unemployment hit the lowest rate ever recorded. And Hispanic unemployment, same thing. So when Lawrence says David was the smartest person he'd ever known about economic policy, I have one question: compared to what? The results? Well, because the results under Trump were objectively better for Americans than anything we'd seen in decades. But here's the tell. This entire segment isn't really about David Potoff. It's about Lawrence O'Donnell's contempt for Trump voters. He's using his dead friend as a shield so he can call you stupid without saying it directly. Now watch what comes next.
And on Saturday, Americans of all ages, from children to people in their 90s, came out to protest something America has never protested before. They were protesting a person. That had never happened before. Plenty of Vietnam War protesters hated Richard Nixon, but they were not actually protesting Richard Nixon. They were protesting his war. If Richard Nixon had ended the Vietnam War, the protests would have stopped. But the No Kings protest is a protest against Donald Trump. The No Kings protest movement started before Donald Trump started his war in Iran.
Wait, America has never had a protest or a person that protested before? Is Larry O'Donnell serious? Bush. People protested Bush. Not his wars, him. They called him a fascist. They said he stole the election. They compared him to certain authoritarian figures from our history for 8 straight years. Obama. The Tea Party wasn't protesting policies in some vacuum. They were protesting him. His entire presidency was opposed by people who thought he fundamentally was transforming America in the wrong direction. But according to Lawrence, this No Kings protest is special. It's the first time Americans protested a person, not a policy, a person. You know what this actually is? This is the left trying to reframe their own behavior as noble resistance. They're not being divisive. Oh no, they're defending democracy from a king. It's brilliant propaganda, and it's also complete nonsense. So here's the reality. Trump was elected by the American people twice. He won the popular vote in 2024, and instead of accepting that voters rejected their policies, well, MSNBC and the progressive left, they're now framing Democrat elections as tyranny. So think about that. The guy who won the election is the king. And the people who lost that election, well, they're the resistance. It makes perfect sense if you don't think about it. Now, here's the interesting thing.
Staten Island is one of the 5 boroughs of New York City, but it is a world away from the rest of New York City across New York Harbor. It is the only Republican section of New York City, the only Republican borough. Staten Island always votes Republican as reliably as Alabama. And on Saturday, Giuseppe Palazzolo took the Staten Island ferry over to Manhattan to march against the person who he says he voted for President of the United States.
Giuseppe Palazzolo.
Okay.
Here's my card.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. So how old are you and where are you from?
I'm from Staten Island, and I've been a MAGA supporter from the very beginning. I believed in him. I thought that he would end wars, like he said in his campaign. He said he wouldn't start wars. He said he'd bring peace to the Middle East. Now look at us. We're knee-deep in this illegal war. He hasn't found the congressional approval. Now we're further from peace and closer to catastrophe than ever before. I feel so betrayed. He went against his campaign promises in a very blatant way.
So a former MAGA supporter from Staten Island. Of course, MSNBC found 1 out of the 75 million Trump voters they found in Giuseppe. So let me be clear. If Giuseppe feels betrayed, that's his right. He can protest, that's America, but let's talk about what's happening. MSNBC just spent days looking for a former Trump supporter to parade on camera. They need this narrative so badly because the actual polling shows Trump support is growing amongst the people who elected him. According to recent polls, Trump's approval among his voters is in the high 80s. His policies on the border, the economy, ending wars, etc., all of those things that he campaigned on, they're popular. But MSNBC found Giuseppe from Staten Island, the only Republican borough in New York City, and now he's their main story. You know what they didn't find? The millions of former Democrats who voted for Donald Trump, the union workers, the Hispanic voters who flipped, the black voters who gave Trump historic support. Those people, they just don't fit MSNBC's narrative. And notice what Giuseppe says. He thought Trump would end endless wars. Okay, Trump is trying to end the conflict in Ukraine through negotiation. He's been trying to avoid getting dragged into these conflicts that we just can't win. But embassy frames that as starting a war in Iran. So this is classic Democrat media manipulation. Take a kernel of truth, wrap it in emotion, ignore all the context, and then present it as proof that Donald Trump betrayed his voters. Meanwhile, in reality, Trump is doing exactly what he'd said he'd do to secure the border. He's putting America first. He is trying to figure out how to bring peace to the Middle East and peace to the Ukraine and Russia conflict. Now watch this, though, because this is where it goes completely off the rails.
Let every round find its mark against the enemies of righteousness and our great nation.
That's Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, praying before a military operation. And according to Lawrence O'Donnell and the Pope, this is somehow offensive. So let me get this straight. An American military leader, before sending troops into combat, asks for divine guidance and protection. And MSNBC thinks that is a scandal. I mean, you literally can't make this up. Look, I'm going to say something a bit controversial. I don't care if you're religious or not. I don't care if you think prayer works or if it doesn't. But the idea that a military leader is asking for success and protecting American forces, and that is somehow blasphemous, well, that tells you everything you need to know how disconnected these people are from regular Americans. Millions of military families pray for their loved ones every single day. They pray for their safety. They pray for their success. And they pray for each one of them to come back home. And Lawrence O'Donnell, well, he just called that offensive. Here's what's really happening. MSNBC, in their attacks, they can't attack Hegseth on substance. So they attack him on faith. They can't argue against securing America's interests, so they frame it as warmongering. And then they bring in the Pope, the ultimate appeal to the religious authority. Except here's the problem with that argument.
And yesterday, the Pope said, "This, our God, Jesus Christ, King of Peace, who rejects war, whom no one can use to justify war. He does not listen to the prayers of those who wage war, but rejects them, saying, even though you make many prayers, I will not listen. Your hands are full of blood."
The Pope says God rejects the prayers of those who wage conflict. Well, isn't that interesting? First off, I don't recall the Pope having this energy when previous administrations were conducting operations. Where was this sermon during operations in 7 different countries? Where was this during the expansion actions in Yemen? And where was this when the last administration oversaw conflicts all across the Middle East? Selective moral outrage is not morality. It's politics in religious clothing. Second, and this is important, Christianity has a long tradition of just war theory. The idea that some conflicts tragically are necessary to defend innocent life and prevent greater harm. Augustine wrote about it. Aquinas wrote about it. This isn't a new debate within Christianity. Now, you can disagree with that ideology, and that's fine, but don't pretend that Pete Hegseth invented the idea that military leaders are being religious. Don't pretend that praying for American forces is somehow unequivocally evil. What Lawrence O'Donnell and MSNBC are really doing here is trying to delegitimize anyone who doesn't share their worldview. If you're religious and conservative, you're a hypocrite. If you support strong military, you're a warmonger. And if you voted for Trump, well, you're stupid. This, my friends, is the Democrat progressive formula, and it's exactly why they keep losing elections. So let me bring this home. This entire monologue from Lawrence O'Donnell is a perfect example of why Donald Trump won. It's the embodiment of elite contempt for regular Americans. It's the media telling you that you're too dumb to understand what's good for you. It's the establishment deciding that your vote doesn't matter because some smart people disagree. They can protest. That's America. They can disagree. Well, that's democracy. But when they frame democratic elections as tyranny, and when they call Trump voters stupid, well, then they attack religious faith, and that's somehow offensive to them. They're not really defending any democracy. They're revealing their own arrogance. David Pott sounds like he was a good man who served his country. I respect that. But Lawrence O'Donnell didn't honor his memory. He weaponized it. Used his friend's passing to push a narrative that half the country is beneath contempt. And that, more than anything, is why Donald Trump won. 75 million Americans are tired of being talked down to. They're tired of being called stupid. And they're tired of being told that their concerns don't matter because the smart people know better. So when Lawrence O'Donnell says smart people don't like Trump, here's my response. Maybe the smart people should start asking why they keep losing elections. Drop a comment. Are you tired of the media's contempt for half of the country? Simple yes or no. Let's see what this audience thinks. And if you want more breakdowns like this, hit subscribe, because MSNBC isn't going to stop with this nonsense, and neither am I. The next story that we're going to cover here is just fascinating. It's hilarious. It's also frustrating, but you have to see this. Tim Burchett, the congressman from Tennessee, he did an interview and he outlined all of the betrayal that happened, that really happened in Congress with Senator Thune and with Chuck Schumer, and how they were trying to finagle some solution that really screwed America and helped the uniparty, and that is critical. It's critical that you watch this. So that's coming up next. Be sure to watch this.